Okay. Uh, as you can see over here on the board, this is the agenda for what we're going to cover today. And when you pull up your classes and look at the videos from here on out, I'm going to have a screenshot of this agenda so that you can go through and see what particular chapters I am lecturing on, or if I'm lecturing about the project or anything like that, all right? So today we are going to talk a little bit about feedback on documents. A few of you have submitted the private introductions of yourselves, and thank you for that. Completely optional. I sent you an email with an attachment of that Word document in the email. It's also posted in your course under orientation. Now, as I said, that's optional, and you may not need to post that right now, but later in the semester, something may happen in your life and you do want to post it and send it to me in an email, that's fine. So that's on an as-needed basis if something occurs and you need some assistance. I am a great resource person for Moore County and Hope County, etc. Now, here is a trick, and you need to know this for everybody and every assignment that you are going to upload into the course. If you are using a Chromebook or a Mac or anything that's issued by a high school or any of that thing, you will want to be very, very careful about your documents. The best thing to do is to save your Microsoft Word documents as a PDF and then upload them as a PDF document. That way your formatting, everything doesn't change, and it's very easy and it looks good and it's easy for me to access. Don't send me anything through Google Docs. No Google Documents at all, ever, 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 never, never, never in this class. All right? Also, if you do use a document that's in a Word format that I've uploaded for you to just write on, you will need to download that document onto your laptop, maybe your phone or your desktop. Complete the form, such as this private interview of yourself. Save it, as I said, like a PDF or a Word document, and then upload it when you send it to me in an email or into the course. Now, if you have questions with any of that, you can always send me an email and I'll be happy to help you, because this is all part of our steep learning curve as we are navigating some things at Sandhills. Okay? Okay. Again, if I forget to take attendance any day, because I've been known to do that, please, 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 somebody shout out and say, Ms. K, you got to take attendance, all right? Because that's very important for the health and well-being of everybody. Okay. Now, when you looked at that orientation video, hopefully you noticed that I listed my phone number and I also listed my email. Please put that in your cell phone as a contact so that if you are absent or you fall sick or you need special assistance, you have easy access to me and you don't have to worry about trying to find it on Moodle. I apologize. I've got a dry throat, so I'm going to be drinking my Diet Coke throughout. All right. Next, you do have some assignments coming up, and hopefully you have printed out your schedule of assignments. And if you will notice, I do not accept any late work. That's a reminder. And I got to get to your class. And you have your first quiz, orientation quiz number 1, due on August 26th. Go ahead and do it early. It has 2 questions. And one is about your commitment to academic honesty. And the other quiz you should take after you watch the other PowerPoint video recording in the orientation section that talks about how to get an A in this class. Those are very detailed policies and procedures for how to complete your journals and how to complete your discussion forums. I'm very picky about these, all right? So keep that in mind. If you want to get maximum points and the grading rubrics are all included, you'll want to do those, okay? And the reason for that is this class is not about opinions. This class is about communication theories, terms, and practices. So this whole process is going to help you to internalize this information so that you become much better at utilizing it and applying it to your real life. I'm telling you, this is the best class you're ever going to take. I have students comment about that all the time. It is all about you and your relationships in the past, in the present right now, as well as in the future. And for many of you, you are in programs that have seen this to be so important that it's a requirement, such as aviation, ophthalmology, and some others. So keep that in mind. This is very, very important. Okay. You also can begin working on your Module 1. Now, I said this in the orientation, but it's important to repeat again. Because this course is really all about you, you have an opportunity to self-direct the assignments that you decide to do. Now, some you have to do, but others you're going to have options. So in the discussion forums, you're going to have options. And for your term project, you're going to have options. In your journals, you're going to have options. Some will have lots of prompts, some will have videos to watch first, lots of stuff going on. So you select the ones that are the most relevant and the most applicable to who you are and what you want to become, and or about the relationships that you want to enhance, improve, or maybe even save. That powerful. Okay. So keep that in mind. You can go ahead and start working on all of those. So you're going to see me kind of going in and out of camera a little bit because this room setup is a little bit strange. Now that I've talked about these elements here, I'm going to draw your attention to these items here, and then I'm going to erase the board so that we can use this to do some diagramming for you to help you understand some concepts. So today, you're going to start actually using the language of IPC. IPC is shorthand for interpersonal communication. All right, so I'm going to start giving you some terms. These are terms that are going to be on your exams, but they also start to make sense of this thing about talking to other people. I'm going to give you 3 process models that we use in communication studies to describe or explain how communication occurs in different settings, okay? All this will be on your test. I'm also going to be talking about a concept called your self-talk, your intrapersonal communication. And finally, I'm going to specifically go through textbook section 1.1 and 1.2. If you have a laptop or a phone, please feel free to open it up, all right? And you can follow along with me in the course and in the textbook, okay? So I really recommend that you at least do it on your phone. okay, if you don't have a laptop with you. You don't have to have a laptop. So if you have a phone that you can follow along, it will be very valuable for you. So you know that that the textbook is free. The hyperlink to it is located in the top section of Block 1, underneath the syllabus and schedule of assignments. It's in HTML, so when you click on it, you're going to see the table of contents. And when you click on it, click down into 1.1, and that's going to take you to where we're going to start today. All right? You got it? You're able to follow along? All right. Terrific. Okay. So I'm going to erase this. Now, I rarely talk too fast. In fact, if anything, some of you will think that I talk too slowly. But whatever it is, if you need me to repeat something again, raise your hand, shout it out, and I'll be happy to help. So the first thing on 1.1 is an introduction of a term that is critically important to understand. All right? And that term is intrapersonal communication. And that differs from personal, but you can't have one without the other. Even though they're different, they are extremely dependent upon each other. Intrapersonal communication is the same thing as self-talk. Yeah, you really do talk to yourself, and you actually really do answer yourself. All right, and I'm not just talking about a psychology perspective, I'm talking about the way you understand who in the world you are. A concept that we use oftentimes is meta communication, where in your brain you are talking to yourself about how you're communicating. That's what meta means. Or you are talking in your brain about how somebody else is communicating with you. All right? Now, the reason why TRA, is so important is because all communication originates in either the heart or the head, right? And that translates to meaning that it's either something that you are feeling, past, present, and future, and or it is something that you are thinking, that you are analyzing, that you are perceiving, that you are cognitive of, all right? So if those are the two elements that are always going to be, and those are like the building blocks, the starting point for all communication, because we all have wants and desires and needs and all kinds of reasons why we communicate, okay? So TRA means how we talk to ourselves. How do we talk about ourselves, to ourselves, as well as to others? All right. So that's really important to hone in on. Wait for it. Are you your own best friend. And we'll be talking about that, especially in chapter 2. So that's where we start, is intra. From there, because we have a want or we have a need, we are going to, because we are social animals, we are going to engage in a conversation with somebody else. Now, interpersonal communication is basically one-to-one. Notice 1-to-1. All right. Now, semantics are very important in communication. If I say one-on-one, how is that different from 1-to-one? Does anybody want to take a guess? You just pull your mask down and shout it out. Nobody? All right. Power. So the phrase having a one-on-one conversation with somebody means that somebody is in the power position for a whole lot of reasons. We're going to be talking about that later in the semester, okay? And in that power position, then there's going to be difficulty, conflicts, all kinds of stuff going on. So whenever you can have communication with another person on as much of an equal, respectful, parallel kind of setting, the better it's going to be. The more meaningful the conversation is going to be, the more positive and productive. Okay? So foundational, that's very important for us. All right. So now scroll down to 1.2 in your textbook. And here I'm going to start with a very basic diagram. So I'm going to give you some terms, and those are all listed there in 1.2, but scroll down to figure 1.1. And that's our first model for communication. Now, I like to be a positive person, so when I do my models, I always do them with happy faces. Unless I'm talking about conflict management or conflict resolution. All right, so we have two happy people. This right here is interpersonal communication. If we add a third person, now we're in small group. All right, and that's a whole other field of communication studies. So we have two people who are going to be engaged in a conversation. All right. We're going to label this person here the sender of a message to a receiver. And that message is going to come through a channel. All right? Very, very, very basic until. Okay? This is what we call the very first type of model. This is what we call, your book calls a transmission. And if you go in some other classes, you may hear it also referred to as a linear model. And the reason is because the conversation, the message is monodirectional. It's one way. I speak, you listen. So kind of like right now, we're going on right here. We're kind of in a linear platform where I'm speaking and you are just receiving it. Now, when you ask a question, it changes and becomes a different model. Or if you respond to a question that I give you, it changes and becomes another model. But when it's just like this, all right? And nobody is expecting or even wanting you to respond. In that case, then it is just a transmission, okay, or linear model. Okay, now this is where we get into difficulty. You would think that this is really pretty easy, but here's where communication gets extremely complex, and that's because of code. The sender operates with a code, or two codes, or three codes, as so does the receiver operate with a code. That code is basically just a means of making sense of our world. And when we are little tiny babies, we begin to create and understand the code. And the code begins with just the relationship between the primary caretaker and the little baby. And then it expands to possibly some siblings, other caretakers. And then it expands more, and the code keeps changing. Perhaps that little baby goes into preschool and just keeps on as we keep on growing and growing. So our codes, all right, will continue to expand. And they come in different kinds, all right? So one code might be verbal, as I speak. Another code may be nonverbal. I don't say a word, but you know I'm not happy when I'm doing this, all right? It could be media. I'm sending something through to you on, through a phone or through a computer, through a video, what have you, okay? Or a radio, all kinds of different mediums. So the channel, all right, oftentimes is going to determine what code is best for the message. If you're standing next to your significant other and you text that person a happy face or a heart, okay, you are selecting a channel for a message that probably is not the best. It would have been better to put your phone down and put your arms around that significant other and give a hug or a kiss, okay? So very important. We have different codes, different channels. Now, the sender has to do what's called encode. Has to take the thought or the feeling and now put it into a context, into a language, into something that the sender believes the receiver is going to understand. English to an English-speaking person. American Sign Language to somebody who cannot hear but does know American Sign. All right, so you have to create, and that's what N means. It just means that you create a message through a code that's going to be sent. Now the receiver then has to decode the message. And the goal, of course, naturally, is that it's going to be decoded accurately, the way it was intended, okay? Okay, that's your basic model. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the next model and add on to this. So everybody scroll down to model 1, wait a minute, yeah, 1.3. 1.3. All right, now this is when it changes. This now becomes the interaction model. They use blue. And the interaction model 100% depends on something called feedback in both directions. All right. Now there's an interaction going on. It's not just one person speaking. That interaction is extremely valuable because the sender is now able to check to ensure that the receiver received the message correctly, the way it was intended. And if it wasn't, then the sender has the ability to make an adjustment or clarification or add new words or add some nonverbals or what have you, right? Now, for both the transmission model and the interaction model, there is something that will get in the way, or some things that will get into the way of everybody being happy, living in the same world together, believing the same things. And I'm going to use a bright red to indicate noise. That is our term in communication studies for everything that gets in the way of being able to understand what somebody is trying to say. All right, now what are the different kinds of noise? When you look back over underneath figure 1.1, it gives you some examples. I'm going to actually give you some additional examples more than what they just give you there. All right, so, and noise is defined as anything that distorts, okay, the message, makes it unclear. So, it might be physical. Maybe there's somebody cutting the grass outside and the physical noise is so loud that the participant can't hear. It might be something like, a rainstorm coming through. There'd be all kinds of things where there's just a physical aspect where you can't hear or understand. It might be physiological. And physiological refers to anything in a person's physical being that prevents the understanding, both the sender and the receiver. So the person may not be able to speak, may not be able to hear, has, perhaps a difficulty with a speaking pattern from a stroke or some other kind of maybe an ailment. So that can be perceived as noise to break down the effectiveness or the ability for a person to understand. Then there's also psychological noise. And I'm going to put all of those up here as the 3 P's. All right? So physical, physiological, but now I'm going to add in something called the psychological. The psychological are the most difficult to overcome. That's what we're living with in our world today. Biases, overt and covert. Biases that people aren't even aware that they have. A bias, you look at me and you see my long gray hair and you think, come on, she's not with it. She doesn't know what's going on. She's not a cool teacher, right? That's ageism. Or you look at me and you see my white skin and you say, well, she doesn't have even the same color background as I have. So what does she know about my lifestyle? Okay, based on color. Sex, gender identification, political standing, leaning, all kinds of those things get in the way, are noise that can prevent. And we are going to talk a lot about that all semester long. Because if you are having difficulty with a significant other, it is because of something on the psychological end, right? It might be maybe you just had a fight with your significant other outside in the hallway before you walked into this classroom, and you can't think about me. You don't care about me. You don't care about interpersonal communication. All you're thinking about is how you're going to get back at the person or what you should have said. Okay, psychological noise gets in the way of you really having a good communication. Okay, another type is called semantic, all right? And semantic is just the use of the words. I have a different understanding from the word than you do, okay? I love the word bitch to explain this. That's why I have to close the doors because I cuss all the time. All right, so here's the example, bitch. Semantic difference. When I was growing up, when somebody called another person a bitch, it was not appreciated. It was ugly. And even today, it can be used in that context where you call somebody, oh man, you are such a bitch. Doesn't feel good. All right? But maybe you have a prize animal dog who is being shown at the American Kennel Association, and that is exactly what this prize dog is referred to as a bitch, because that's the original denotation, meaning of the word. But nowadays, you guys, oh my goodness, you're calling your best friends bitches? You're calling your significant others bitches? You're watching videos that say bitch all the time? And many of you have absolutely no problems with it. That's semantic. That's semantic. Same thing with the N-word. There's no way in hell I'm going to say the N-word in a classroom. You guys might say it all the time. And it's okay if you say it, but if this old white lady says it, that's just not right. Okay? Semantic. Also some culture. So coming into culture, we're going to put over here context. So the culture in which you were raised is what's known as a context. And that culture tells you what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. What you can say and what you can't say. Or who you can say it to and who you cannot say it to. You know, coming in the South, it's yes ma'am, no ma'am. In California, we never say that. Okay? Personally, I kind of like it. Okay, but that's a cultural differentiator, right? So culture refers to what you believe in, your faith, etc., faith traditions, what you have an attitude about that's either okay or not okay, all right? Or it might be of value, the things that you hold as most important. Okay? So hopefully you're all registered to vote. And hopefully you guys are all going to go vote. Now to me, that's an incredibly passionate value I have as a teacher of communication studies. Our First Amendment, it's our right. Our own democracy is being threatened. Are you going to go vote? Register to vote, please. Okay. So that's context. Another context that's very important to know is what's called the relationship. All right? And the relationship is, what does that person mean to you? If that person is important to you, then you're going to protect the relationship and you're going to hesitate before you send a message to make sure you sound right, you're using the right words, and the person's going to understand it. That's relationship. If you don't give a darn about the relationship or you don't even like the person as part of the relationship, what you say and how you say it's going to be very different from somebody who's important. Okay, so relationship is another context that we look at. Another context that I want to hit on is our social economic. Social economic is about power. Who has the power in the relationship based on the culture that you come from and your 3 Ps, especially psychology. Okay? Those are the power or the lack thereof is driven so much by education, by your social status, by your economics, the kind of job you have, and all those things. And that also is going to drive. So all of this additional thing that I put on in red, with the exception of noise, falls under, let's go down to figure 1.4. So scroll down in your textbook to 1.4. All right. When we put all of this context around our box, at that point, we are talking about the transactional model. Transactional communication. All right? And transactional communication simply means that all of this is going on simultaneously at the same time. Most of the time without thinking about it. Here lies many problems. The more we can become mindful, and not mindless, but the more we can become mindful of all of these elements, the more effective communicator we become. Now, when I worked on my master's and when I have worked with clients in my consulting practice, one of my areas of primary education experience and my research is in leadership development. And leadership development is when somebody is a good leader, has what we call communication competence. It's also known as emotional intelligence. That's been around for a long time, but a lot of research done by Daniel Goleman. And some of you, as you start to think about your term projects, may want to do something with social intelligence. Because a socially intelligent person understands this and strives to be as mindful and therefore respectful for all interactions, even if it's going to just be linear or if they're only going to be interactional. Now, I'm going to conclude this section by saying, I'll go back over here. The best way to describe all of this, I think, as what kind of a model it is, do we have anybody in the room who plays athletics? Do we have any athletes? No basketball players or volleyball players or baseball players or softball, soccer, lacrosse? Nothing? Ever? Really? Okay, that's all right. I never did either. I was just always a spectator. But I am a huge Flyers basketball and volleyball fan. And this, if you think about basketball, represents what's going on. So during a basketball game, especially if you watch our basketball games, it's fast. It's fast paced. It's up and down the court. It's going all the time. There's dribbling, there's passing, there's shooting, there's fouling. Some fouls are caught, some are not. There's trash talk. There's whistles blowing. There's coaches yelling. There's other coaches yelling. There's the fans yelling. There's the clock being watched. All of that is going on at the same time. And yet, as a communication scholar, we can actually dissect, according to these elements, what's really going on. It's called deconstructing the communication, because that's a way, when we deconstruct communication, we can find where the breakdowns occur. And we can use it to identify when there's not teamwork, or there's not communicating, or the signals are not being communicated correctly, or whatever it might be. That's why people who get degrees in communication are very well employed, all right? Whether it's in conflict resolution, mediation, prelude to going on to becoming attorneys, going into senior executive leadership, teaching and development, training, what have you, we make a lot of money. As a consultant, I make a whole lot more money than as a teacher, but I like teaching a lot more. But what you can do is you can step back and you can see how valuable this is, not only in your real life, but also as you work in the workplace. All right, so I'm going to bring a lot of that into what we're going to be doing. All right, so having said that, there are some key takeaways. These models are simply used to help explain the complexity of communication, recognize what is the differentiator between each one of these. And does anybody have any questions? Or if anybody would like to stay after the class, I'll be on camera for about 5 minutes. If you just want to go up to the camera and ask me a question one-to-one, that's fine. Or send me an email. I'll be happy to answer your questions. All right. You're free to go. And I'll see you next Thursday. Make sure you watch all the videos like on Tuesday, after I lecture on Tuesday. Make sure you also start thinking about your term project.
Okay, Ms. Kay, we meet the same time, Tuesday, virtual?
Not on Tuesday. On Thursday, you're going to be in here. On Tuesday, you're going to watch the video that I record.
Okay.
So I will be teaching that class this time on Tuesday, and it takes me until later in the afternoon to actually convert it and put it into YouTube and then upload it for you to watch. But before the end of the day on Tuesday, you'll be able to see it.
Okay, every start of every semester, getting everything synchronized, where I gotta be, what time. That also will lend me when I was studying to try to keep up with it. But anyway, that's 2 more semesters to go.
Oh, awesome. What program are you in?
I'm in aviation.
Yay! I have a lot of aviation students. I love it.
Good, great folks over there, good students, as you can tell.
Yes.
I'm a little bit senior to most of those.
Not that much.
I finished college in '84.
Ah.
and went in the Army and spent 31 years.
Oh, well, thank you for that service. We appreciate it in this community.
Yeah.
All right, well, look at you go there. All right, well, you are wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Good class. I'm learning a lot.
Already?
Already, even though I was an instructor for years in the Army, parachute instructor, artillery instructor, almost was a drill sergeant.
So sometimes it's fun to take a class and see what some other perspectives are of the same things you've been doing.
Right.
All right.
We handle things a little bit different than the parachute and special forces units.
Right.
It's the same.
Yep.
But anyway, have a blessed one. Be safe.
All right, you too. Bye now.
Okay.
Bye, Miss Kay. See you in a little bit.
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome.